Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes. For those keeping count, this is episode 287. So we are slowly approaching that 300 mark. Only took 6 years. So this intro is going to be a little different because my next guest is all about the audio. So I want to take this a little slow so that you understand. In a world of awesome hair, two guys get on a podcast where no one can see their hair. I mean, that's what happens when the audio is strictly audio. There's no video. So you can't see all the other extra stuff. But my next guest, Danny Galvez, is the maestro of audio. And so we're going to explain the world of audio and why it's important, not only for your podcasts, but for your audiobooks and your videos and everything else. So, Danny, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. And we were talking offline earlier, Rob, and sharing your story. And that I think that's just kind of, how many books you've edited and written and stuff like that over the years. And it's about the same for my journey. I started back in 2014 and I worked in radio for about 17 years, various positions as a copywriter, on-air producer. I was an on-air talent for pretty much every day shift. I was a stunt man on a morning show at one point too. So I pretty much worked all the jobs and even the janitor position. But during 2014, I was struck with this revelation of, hey, why aren't you using your radio talents anymore? I was in the mortgage industry, raising my younger children, big house, big backyard, family, wife. So I was like, man, I got to grow up. I can't play radio DJ anymore. But at that point, when I was in the mortgage industry, it struck me. I'm like, I really need to provide something for my family for long after I'm gone. I love stories. I love hearing other people's voices. It's one of the reasons why we got into radio. You like the sound of your voice, right? Some people don't, but I decided to take my talents that were latent and they were dormant for a while, and I pulled them to the front and said, hey, I'm going to do something with audiobooks. So I went on this journey of discovering, and you'd be amazed. I've got to tell you, there's so much content out on YouTube that people give for free. And I got started with a guy named Bill DeWeese, and there were just free videos that he made about how to get started in audiobooks. So I had the microphones, I had the setup. I set up my studio inside the fourth bedroom of my closet, and I started auditioning. And I think first 10 books I auditioned for, I landed 3 right away.
Wow.
So one was an educational book, one was romance, and then the other one was it was nonfiction, but it was about craftsmen founders of like tech companies and things of that nature. It's called the Craftsman Founder Manifesto. So it was great. Yeah, it was. I had no idea what I was doing. I'll tell you that. I just knew I had a microphone, I had a voice, and I wanted to produce something for my family.
Yeah.
No different than authors, right? Like after an author passes, as long as they own the rights, those rights stay within the family. Any royalties and earnings stay up to 70, 80 years beyond their passing.
And
So
this is the words that I love to share with people, what I stand for, as an entrepreneur, freedom and legacy, the
yes.
freedom to do what I want, when I want, how I want, and for the benefit of whom I want, and legacy. What am I leaving behind for the next generation to learn from? My books or that legacy, my podcasts, my videos. And for you, it's that booming voice that people can recognize. And that voice becomes your brand, so not only do they see, you with your long hair and but they can put that voice. And we were talking off air about, how when the audio is crappy, we don't even want to watch the video. But if the audio is crystal clear, but the video is crappy, we'll still watch that film because the audio is what attracts us.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm glad you said that too, because I guess the big question would be why audio? For thousands of years since the beginning of mankind, we've been telling stories,
Mhm.
right? I mean, think about gathering around the discovery of fire, right? Boiling water, the whole nine yards. We've always told stories throughout history. And it doesn't matter what your title is, where you're from, your background. Stories carry messages. Some of them are timeless. Some of them are only for a certain time.
Mhm.
And that's the magic of audio. Second supporting factor is that not everybody has the ability to read. When I started my audiobook journey, I narrated 40 audiobooks in the first 3 or 4 years. And I narrated them, edited them, mastered them, everything. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to narrate all those books because I knew that when I sat down and put a book in my hand, I would get tired.
Mhm.
So I would just start to doze off. So what I did was I stood on both my feet and just narrated all the books.
Mm.
And I found out that I thought better. I was quicker. I was able to absorb the material better. I actually comprehended what I was reading a lot better.
Mhm.
And it was amazing because that right there, when I figured out that little piece, that got me excited because then I knew I could really mass produce what I was doing at a very rapid pace. And when I say mass produce, I mean really getting in there. And you said something, I love what you said, freedom and legacy,
Mhm.
right? The words that you've written in this book are going to go, they're going to be around 100
Mhm.
years, from now, guaranteed. This is great. Somebody's going to be able to look up your name, look up the title of your book, and go, "Hey, I've got that book. Oh, wait, but I've got Rob's voice over here too." Right? And that's a really, really powerful thing if you think about it.
Right. And the thing is that, that book manifested itself from these podcasts, the eHero series. That Steve Gamlin and Steve was on the show probably more frequently than anybody else, and 7 times in 5 years. And I know after that seventh interview, I just knew that these conversations needed to be in a book. And so when you read the book, it's basically our conversations. Rob said, Steve said, blah, blah, and but here's the thing is that sometimes we can have a brilliant audio message,
Mhm.
and it could be on a podcast, it could be on wherever. If people aren't going there to listen, then you have to put it in a form where they can take it with them. And that's what the purpose of the book was. So, yes, audio is powerful,
Mhm.
but how is that audio reaching somebody else? When they read this book and they go through the transcripts, a lot of people have said, you know what, in my mind, I can see and hear you two talking.
It's amazing.
So even though it's in a print form, when people read this book in their mind, they are getting the audio version in their head. And so, it's audio plays a powerful, force in how we deal with life. And I want to go back to in the 70s.
Mhm.
I used to go to my grandmother's house. We'd spend a night, and she'd always have a radio in the room, and so we would dial it into the local NBC channel because the speakers on her TV didn't work. So we would watch the video on the TV, but the audio came out of the radio. And
That's
if you go
awesome.
back even further, all the shows, all the tales, everything was performed through radio, through audio first.
That's right. That's right. And that storytelling factor is so important. And I know you work with a lot of authors, and I think there's something that a lot of people forget is that audio is great because there are people that are dyslexic,
Mhm.
right? There are people that are illiterate. They cannot read your book.
Right.
If you gave them your book, they would not be able to read it. And it's not just children, it's adults too.
Mhm.
You would be amazed how many people have made it through and worked in very powerful positions, not being very proficient readers.
Right.
But that's where audio kind of supplemented. The blind. A lot of audiobooks got started with, a lot of audio book narrators that actually get started, they start because they read for the Institute for the Blind. And they do it as a gift. Let's
Mhm.
call it a gift. I don't want to call it charity because it's not charity. I actually had a blind woman in my broadcasting class. when I went to Brown Institute. It's no longer in existence, believe it or not. It used to be part of National Education Centers, but I won a scholarship that year, 95, to go to the National Education Center and to study broadcasting. But one of my classmates was blind and she took the bus. She was using the bus system. And I was really enthralled. I was like, how does this work?
Mhm.
She ended up getting a job in radio, and they had all of the braille markings on the board, so that she had a wonderful voice, just very soothing and calm, and a very centered individual. It was amazing. Um, and I got to tell you, it's another it's another thing that audio can do that takes away excuses based on limitations, right? I mean, think about that. Can't read, that's crippling. If you're dyslexic, it's another challenge. People get frustrated. Many people that are dyslexic. If you're blind, right? Audio is really great.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll tell you this too. Comprehension's another part of that. And like you said, the tone, the pitch, the resonance, the flow, the ebbs, that conversation you're describing, that you and Steve are having in the book, the people that know you're like, I could hear you guys in my head, which is brilliant. And
Mhm.
this is also very important too. Just because if you're writing in your voice and you're speaking in your voice, when people hear your voice, that just builds that connection, makes it much stronger
Mhm.
than anything else. So, and the beautiful part is you don't have to have a high powered, big voiced narrator for the work that you've written.
Right.
So,
You know,
yeah,
and you know, going back to radio, listening to songs, listening to the DJs. I didn't know what they looked like. I
yeah.
pictured in my mind what I thought they looked like. Video ruined it, you know. When I actually saw them, what they looked like on video, I'm like, no, that's not them. Doesn't even look what I have envisioned in my brain. So those those audio, conversations, those audio songs, whatever that you're hearing on radio, give you a whole different dimension of imagination.
So tell me this, since you're bringing that up, that like what was the weirdest mismatch in video versus voice that you saw in your time that made you just go, what? What is
Yeah,
that?
it's there was I believe there was a DJ called Weems, and I can't remember his first name. And I had envisioned in my brain what I thought he looked like. And when I met him, I'm like, dude, no, you just ruined. I'm going to a different station now because you just ruined it for me.
Believe
You
it or
know?
not, a lot of DJs are nerds. Like
Mhm.
they're like the modern day gamers, right? The ones that are on the unhealthy side. They used to be anyways.
Yeah.
Um, it's really interesting. But now, I mean, obviously things have changed. When I was coming up, you could be disheveled and wear sweatpants and come in and look a mess, look like you just went out to a rager the night before. I got in on the back end of radio when it was starting to fade out, that whole starlight, starshine
Mhm.
factor. Like you were almost a celebrity. It's like a D-list celebrity, but you're still a big deal because you're on the radio. You have
Mhm.
that credibility. And that was the one thing where you look at that and go, man, this is great. If they could just see you on TV, it wouldn't match up. And that's funny you said that. Nowadays it's a little bit different because everything's video. A lot
Yeah.
of things are video.
Yeah.
Um, even with an audio podcast, I've produced, gosh, probably well over 4,000 podcast episodes myself in the last 4 years. So been pretty busy with that, but there's been a shift going into video.
Mhm.
And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, hey, I can see Rob's eyes, I can see his facial expressions, I can see, him thinking, I can see him hesitating, I can see all these things, but I can connect to that because I'm a human being.
Mhm.
And and that's where the magic comes in. I like the tone, the pitch, and the resonance. And to your point earlier, yeah, audio is very important. If something's too high pitched, if it's out of range, if it's hard to hear, if I have to work to hear what you're trying to say to me, you have to improve your audio, right?
Oh, and as we are getting on this podcast, I couldn't hear you. My headset, I think, is broken, and It's if I can't hear,
Mhm.
then the podcast isn't going to work well.
Yeah.
So the not only do we have to have excellent audio,
Mhm.
we have to have good hearing to hear the audio. And I've noticed as I got older, certain pitches I can't hear anymore.
Yeah. I like to
And
call it mature.
yeah. So it's you as a DJ, you as this audio enchanter, you have to be able to speak not only in a fashion that younger people can hear, but the older people that are kind of losing their hearing can also hear and understand.
But the great thing about, audio, and I think that's the part too, because going through that process, I think some of the training was to the optimal pitches, and this is some next level nerd stuff I'm going to share, but is between negative 18 decibels and negative 23 decibels. In there, that's the fat, that's the sandwich, that's the meat cake, that's the optimal place for human beings to actually hear
Mhm.
comfortably without having to work for it, right? We want things to be easy. It's got to flow with us. So your tone, your pitch, your resonance, if that's good to go and you're being yourself and you're being genuine, you're going to make a connection, but the audio quality is important.
Mhm.
So, and there's a lot of little things that you can do, but yeah, to your point, it's great. I mean, you should care about everything that you lay down and
Mhm.
send out to people. You should double check and make sure that the audio quality of what you're producing, whether it be on film or whether it be on just audio itself, that it's high quality, the highest that you can.
Mhm.
Because the person receiving that message, if it's uncomfortable to listen to or they have to work for it, they're not gonna they're not going to really lean into it. And that's I think one of the things that makes us different from the other animals, right, on the planet is that we can vocalize, we can communicate, and we have very beautiful voices that we've been bestowed. And I think you have to remember the voice is a muscle.
Mhm.
And it's like anything. If you want to be in shape, you got to go to the gym. Same thing with your voice. If you want a powerful voice, you have to work it every single day,
Yeah.
even if you don't like your voice.
Well, and,
So,
and there's voices out there that are very recognizable, and you would hope that, like Urkel from Family Matters, the old '90s TV show, you could
yeah,
just you didn't even have to know what he looked like, but you hear that voice anywhere and instantly Urkel.
that's right.
And
That's right.
so there are voices out there that'll do that. Um, Whitney Houston had an awesome voice. Mariah Carey. These are singers that I think have a dynamic range. Even Freddie Mercury. You know,
Yo, man.
but some of these singers today, it's just they'll sing and then they just put it through some vocal magic console and it spits out. I don't know. I think sometimes we need to be able to hear the person's real voice and not
Yes.
just auto-tuned.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it goes back to and it's kind of auto tune is one of those contradictions to the voice. It's almost an insult, right? And I'm not saying, hey, they need a little boost. I think it's great to supplement, but all the great singers, like you said, you mentioned Freddie Mercury, Pavarotti, right? Placido Domingo. You've got people that are, Andreas Bocelli, right? Andrea Bocelli. I mean, great. His son is even singing now. Um, you've got Julio Iglesias, and I'm referencing a lot of
Mhm.
Latin stars, but they're also very raw, natural talents as well. Um, I'll go as far as saying Celine Dion. I mean, even though she might have ruined Titanic, it's still you can't forget her voice, right?
She sung Titanic with that voice.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. But yeah, there's something to be said for that nice raw quality. And I think a lot of it is just, circumstance of the business part of the music business. And there are many great singers on the planet,
Mhm.
many wonderful voices, like you said, very distinctive. Like Al Pacino, right? Al Pacino is one of those guys. It's like, hey, what are we doing here? Right? He's got that real gruff demeanor. Robert De Niro, I mean, I don't have a great Robert De Niro impersonation, but again, distinctive voice. Um, and that spans, gosh, beyond generations. You
Yeah.
know, you mentioned Freddie Mercury. My daughter knows who Freddie Mercury is. She knew who he was when she was 9 or 10. It's like, how did you? She started singing Under Pressure one day, and I was like, where did you hear that? She's like, oh, I saw it on YouTube, Dad. It's a great song. Check check out this new song, Dad. I'm like, that's not new. So yeah, the voice is an instrument and you do have to practice it. It's like anything you do every single day. It is a muscle and it's an instrument. So there's if you want to improve your voice, um, it's very important to work it out every day. So 1
Yeah,
million percent.
and in the 80s, one of my biggest I think fans that are bands that I like was Huey Lewis.
Yes.
And he can barely even sing anymore because his vocal cords are all messed up, and to watch somebody that you admired, to have that vocal presence, and now he's trying to rehab his voice, and it's just it sounds awful, and but he said there's something off with his ears. He can't hear right. So, he's singing off pitch, he's singing, and it's just I don't like that. I want my heroes to fade away, not to go out like this.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's the circumstance of life, right? You already know. We already know that. I mean, the gift inside of it is that we deny,
Hmm.
even at our ages. I'm 48 right now, but yeah, I'm still denying. No, I'm going to be here forever.
Hmm.
And the fact of the matter is, I'm sure Huey Lewis. I got to see him in concert back when I was a teenager, which was awesome. And it was a 4th of July celebration in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And my father was in the Marine Corps, so we got some benefits and perks. We'd see 5 or 6 bands. It was almost like a mini festival before the festivals were festivals, and fireworks. But they would bring in some big name talents, and he was one of them. But fantastic singer. But here's the good news, though: his voice in its pure state still lives on because it's been recorded.
Hmm.
It's been preserved at that time in history. And that's something that will never go away, right? You won't hear another Huey Lewis in your lifetime. So might find some people that sound like him, but again, that's another that's another supporting factor for laying down your voice. And if you're watching this or listening to this, and if you have written a book and you have a podcast, you should be narrating your own books. You really should be narrating your own books. So
Yeah, I have a lot of books I have to. It's like, oh,
you've got a lot of work to do, don't you,
a
Rob?
lot of work to do. Yeah, and some of them are co-author books, so I'd have to bring in the co-author, and we could probably switch back and forth on the voices, and but I've also known that there are people that have written their own books
Mhm.
that should never do the audio for their books. Their voice is just not pleasant. It's just gruff. Or they're just not enunciating well enough. And I was going to add to your comment where you have to have a similar voice or something of that nature. And Weird Al comes to mind.
Mm,
'Cause he's parodied all these songs, and he has this innate ability to be able to mimic or mock or make fun of all these artists, but in a good way.
yeah.
He's taking their songs, their lyrics, changing them, and people can hear that song that he's singing, and they immediately go to the original artist who sang their rendition. And so that's very powerful gift to have. And but there's just so many people out there, I think, that get lost in the nuance of sound. They
Yeah.
they, they
There's a lot of moving parts to it.
Mhm.
But to your point earlier, I think this is where coaching comes into play. And I think the other part too is, I know you say, well, some people don't enunciate well. And like I just wrapped a session this week with an author. She has excellent diction, but what I did was during our session, we recorded it last week and it was over 2 days. So we took a time block of maybe 6 hours max. It's a 3 hour book, which is about typical. So for every finished hour of audio, it's going to take you 2 hours to narrate it with all your stops, your pauses. But I was there on the other side of the Zoom as she was recording it on her side to stop her and listen for, hey, go back and say that phrase again. It was like an active recording session. No different than if you're in LA and you're doing voiceover work and you walk into the studio and the director says, hey, I need you to drop that line again. Say it with this, say it like this. There are ways around that. So you can still get the message out and then go back to just, stumbling on words or mumbling them or not pronunciating, things properly. So there are solutions. It's a little rigorous for the author because most people aren't used to, number one, reading their books after they've written them, right? They're not used to narrating them. It does take quite a bit of energy to project your voice. You've got your diaphragm, you've got your vocal cords. You want to make sure you don't wear them out. You can't be speaking from just your throat, right? Your larynx. You can't just use that by itself. You need the support of air to come through, and then you've got the pitch, the tone, the enunciations, the inflections. There might be certain pronunciations in there that might be French. And so you want to make sure that you nail all of those things in that process. There are many moving parts when it comes to audio. The technical side isn't too bad. We have USB microphones. We've got, higher quality microphones that you can plug in. XLR, you can probably see mine. Mine's a Shure SM7B. I really like that microphone. It was kind of a gift to me after I wrapped a couple of projects last year. And I think I'll tell you this, because I've had people record audiobooks with their laptops because the microphones are good enough. And I've had people record audiobooks with microphones like the Yeti, like the Blue Yeti. I can show you. I've got, I think everybody's had one of these. Do you have one of these?
I had one for about 2 days and it broke.
Oh, it broke? Oh,
Well, I think one of my kids came in here or my grandkids and that was that.
yeah. Yeah, they're great. They're robust. They're road machines. But like I would say if anybody's, wanting to get started, I've had this microphone. I got it when I was 30 years old. I've had it 18 years. Yeah. Yeah. It lasted longer than my marriage. So it's fantastic. It's great. But yeah, I carry this thing around. If I need to lay down audio real quick, if I'm on the road, then I'll take this with me. But in a lot of it's amazing with technology. Technology's made it very easy for us to record on the go, and also AI has made it very easy to do the editing portion of it, but it's not quite perfected. So,
Right.
oh, thank God, which is, there's certain idiosyncrasies that have to be applied in that process. So the technical side of editing an audiobook, I'll give you some numbers real quick. So we kind of talked a little bit. So let's say you have a 3 hour audiobook. It's going to take you on average, if you're a proficient reader and you know the text very well and you've read through it, it's going to take you on average about 2 hours per finished hour of audio. How many words are in one finished hour of audio? 9,300. So if you have a 30,000 word book, your book's going to be a little over 3 hours. Okay. So, it's going to take you at least 6 hours to narrate. That's with the stops, the interruptions. Let's say somebody tries to call you, or I got an emergency, mom, I need to talk to you right now. Or somebody rings your doorbell and makes a noise in the background. You got to stop. So here are the next facts. As far as the production of it and going through that process, the editing, what we're listening for is clicks, pops, mouth noises, things that don't belong in the background. Sometimes you'll hear a plane flying over in some of the books. You can't edit some of those things out. So those things they happen, especially if you can be in an insulated room, but if you live in an area that's high traffic for flights and things like that, or helicopters, military, you live close to a military base, sometimes the helicopters fly real low and they rattle the buildings, the houses. You're gonna have some issues with that. But as far as the editing, you're removing all of those. So that process is to edit the pops, the clicks, sibilants. You've got words that'll kind of bleed over a little bit, or there's too many sounds like a snake sibilants. You want to get rid of some of those. When you're done with that, your breaths, you'll want to take the breaths out. Any hard consonants, right? Those sounds right there make a big difference, and you have to soften them a little bit. So the process of editing, for every hour of finished audio you have, it's going to take you anywhere between, if you're very proficient, 3 to 5 hours per finished hour. So on the high end, if you have a 3-hour book, it's going to take you about 15 hours to edit that book. This doesn't include mastering. Mastering is the easy part. This is where you basically set it into an MP3 format between -18 and -23 decibels. Root mean squared, the RMS. This is like next level stuff. If you're sleeping right now, believe me, I've got a detailed guide on this I can share with you. We can have a conversation, but basically these are the stats and the specs that are required to be able to distribute to Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. So that's where all of the distribution goes. As you know, Amazon owns a company called ACX, Audiobook Creation Exchange. They've got a lock on the market, okay? But I'll tell you this, that it's probably one of the most popular platforms, and it's easy once you get in and figure out how to do the technical side. And that's a lot of, I focus on that in working with authors to dial that in. And there's an easier way to do it. One thing though, with AI and editing software, you have to be very careful. You don't want to go in, because I've heard this a lot too. And tell me what you think. Like, like what are your thoughts on AI narrated books?
I don't like AI. I use AI for certain tasks.
Okay.
But when we upload books to Amazon, one of the questions that Amazon asks you, was AI involved in the production of this book? They want to know. And so no, I don't want it in my books. Although I know other authors who have used AI in their books, and they've generated the whole book using AI. Who's that book going to? Because we as humans, we want an imperfect book. It's just how we are. There are people out there who say, well, Rob, I found errors in your book, spelling errors or this or the grammar error. And I'm like, okay, but you read the book. You enjoyed the book, right? Well, yeah. AI is going to take all those imperfections out and strip the humanity.
Oh, people will be miserable. They'll have nothing to complain about.
Yeah.
They'll be destroyed. What are they going to do now?
And so, the other day I was in the car with my wife. I was driving and I was thinking about something else, but I was trying to also concentrate on her conversation, and I started stuttering. And she just looks at me, and the first thing I did when I looked back at her, I said, "Sorry, my needle skipped." And she started laughing. All the kids in
That's
the back are going, what did Granddad say? Because they don't know the reference.
That's
You
right.
know, and so, it's like,
I love it. I used to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I had a misfire." Right? That was always like and like you said, those references. I still remember. I hear the like the record scratch.
yeah,
There's no frame of reference. Like, I don't even think using those are cool anymore, because I mean, the only reason why today's generation knows about the record scratch is because you know, the the DJs, world
yeah.
famous DJs traveling around, they still keep that alive. They keep that alive inside of, their when they hear record scratches, they see somebody on the
But the
turntables.
first the first song I ever heard on CD was China Grove by the Doobie Brothers.
Okay.
The second song was One Vision by Queen. And so every time I hear the Doobie Brothers sing China Grove, whoever is with me, I'm like, that's the first song I heard on CD. But everybody was like, well, CD. I mean, they always compared the audio quality of CD, saying it sounds very tinny or hollow. But MP3 is even worse than CD. The
Yeah.
average person can't tell, but an audio someone that grew up training their ears on that
Mhm.
audio, they can tell.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, you really can. And that's the difference. I remember like when I worked at radio stations, we'd have a lot of artists come by and they'd drop off their demos. We'd get demo tapes every week. And I worked in every format from, hip hop all the way to country, news. I worked at a news station, News Talk 99.3. It was it was pretty an oldie station. I love the oldie station because it was like, hey, let's keep it light, let's keep it going. It's like, hey, what's up? That's the big bopper. Let's roll, and
Mhm.
you that was the format. It was nice, light, easy, and just having a good time. But people would drop off their CDs and you could tell the quality. You'd listen to them and go, yeah, man, that's a no. And within the first 15 seconds whether or not it's going to be good or not.
Mhm.
And and that's how it's a great example too. And I'm glad that you brought that up because that's how much our attention spans have shrunk.
Mhm.
And it's gone down to 3 seconds. You've got 3 seconds to make a huge impression. So if your audio quality is not where it needs to be, you're going to lose people.
Yeah.
You'll tune them out.
Yeah.
So
But here we go on the flip side. Years ago we had this audio social media network called Clubhouse. Maybe
yeah,
some people still use it, but the majority after 6 months couldn't deal with it anymore because we're so in tune now to have the video and the audio at the same time. So it was YouTube or Facebook or Instagram having these videos, but now you're back to Clubhouse and it was too much like radio. Well, people were
right.
like, "Well, I can just get my radio." Now you can get radio on your phones and you can get radio. I mean, for me in my car, I have XM radio, so I can choose whatever station I want. I don't want to listen to people arguing, over their business philosophies. I can just switch it to XM and listen to whatever I want. And
Yeah.
I think that was the misfire of that social network. They didn't understand the audience, and it wasn't about because most people love audio in its purest form. They just didn't like all those people at once jabbing and discussing everything that it just wasn't interesting. So, I mean, that's my take on it. I probably spent maybe 10 minutes on Clubhouse, and every time I tuned in, it was always people arguing about something. I'm like, no, this is just
Yeah.
art.
Well, yeah, and to your point too, you talk about video as well too. There are things that get revealed in video that audio does not. And I went into Clubhouse a couple of times, but I think the at that point in time when it rolled out, there's a lot of people appropriating certain lifestyles or influence that they don't have or experience, and it's like let's play the game to see who can be the biggest BSer,
Mhm.
right? So they step up and they go, yeah, hi, I'm this and that, and these are my qualifications, and this is my story, and they would get into a story that is like it was rehearsed, well thought out, but at the end of the day, there was a lack of connection. And where video fills the gaps is you can tell if somebody's not telling you the truth. You
Mhm.
can tell. I mean, there's little hints and signs all over the place. The face has tons of muscles, right? And you
Yeah,
can
I'm
see
always sarcastic.
it just, yeah. Mine says cake. I love cake. That's it. I'm just a cake eater. So
I remember back in the early 80s when MTV came out and it was strictly music videos. And I would rush over to my grandmother's house just to see if Yes was playing Owner of the Lonely Heart. And you know, and then after a few years, it went to reality TV. And I'm like, this sucks. I don't want
yeah.
to see this. This is awful. Bring back my music videos. And so our culture now is just constantly evolving, but we are going back to this we want better audio.
Mhm,
And so, whether people out there are doing podcasts, whether they're doing, audio books,
mhm.
that audio has to be more powerful than anything else.
I'm
We don't
glad you
want to
said
hear
that too.
we don't want to hear the clicks and the ums and the ahs and you know, so yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah, you really don't. And I'm going to give you some resources to your audience anyways that they can use to deploy. So if you have a podcast, let's say you have an audio only podcast, if you're not using Adobe Enhance, let's say you're in a room that's doesn't have carpet, it's not warm, you don't have a warm room tone. I will tell you this, you can have a $30 microphone, but if you have carpeting and you're in a closet and you're surrounded by things inside that room that keep the room what we call warm, then you're going to have a very good sound over
Mhm.
anybody that's in an office with, you know, tile floors, high ceilings, bare walls. That's so make sure you look at your room when you're going into that. But Adobe Enhance, basically what it does, it's free and you can run your files through there. They'll give you a certain amount up to a certain point,
Mhm.
but it's still in beta mode right now, but it sounds studio quality. So I would encourage you to go and like as you're listening to this, to go and take a sample of audio that you recorded, and I want you to keep the raw where you can find it, but also upload that into Adobe Enhance and then process it. You'll have to set up an account. Doesn't cost anything, but it's a great way to kind of start leaning in, and you can clean up your audio very very well. It does not edit your audio right now, but what it will do, and I know that they're working on it. That's why AI, it's still, I think they're going to get there. I don't know how long that's going to be. It could be a year from now, it could be 2 years from now,
Mhm.
which that happens. That's going to change the whole editing factor in industry, which is great news for authors too. You can literally record and have it edited and produced at home, saves you tons of money. Okay. Another tool you might want to use, I used this for a while. It wasn't too bad. It was called cleanvoice.ai. They're a company out of the UK, and basically they would edit your audio. The only challenge is you have to go in there and make sure that you space it out accordingly because it's not going to leave enough room. You'd have to program it and just basically say, "Hey, listen, I need you to go in here, you upload your audio file, and there are certain settings that you can use to be able to leave enough space in between words. If you want half a second, if you want a full second, you'll still have to do some manual editing on it. The other part too is sometimes if it doesn't understand, the AI doesn't quite understand your voice, it's going to clip out certain words. And that's what was happening. I was producing podcasts with that, and I started catching that my audio was skipping. It sounded like a record skipping almost. Every other word would be chopped up, right? So I was like, hey,
Yeah,
I
and
can't.
that's great for a Chinese karate flick, but
Yeah, that's
not
right. That's
great
right.
for a
It
podcast.
wouldn't, yeah, hey, you get over here. What? Yeah, you can't, but it didn't translate well on audio only. So I was like, well, I'm going to abandon that one for now. And I'm glad that I did. I put it aside. I got back into my craft. Um, Carpal tunnel's a real thing. So is shoulder pain. But knowing that you've put your hands and your ears and your eyes on the work that you've laid down, um, you can really output some great audio.
Mhm.
So those are two resources I would look at. The third one is going to be Descript. And Descript is great for video and for audio. This is one where you can go in, let's say you stutter a lot, or let's say you say and or so. You have crutch words. We all use crutch words, right? We have misfires, we have skipping records. So those things happen. You can go in, select the text, and remove all of the crutch words in one click. On average, in each podcast episode, and I did a study on this too internally for my clients. I had probably about 8 clients, 9 clients that were podcasting clients at the time. And they, on average, had 400 plus additional words that were not required in that. That's a lot. It's a lot. And they were extemporaneous, like that they didn't need to have that many words in there.
Yeah,
So
when I edited the transcripts to put them in this book, the unscripted book, there was a lot of ahs and ums and other words that didn't need to be there because it becomes our natural way of talking. But when it becomes into a book, people don't want to read that. They can understand it. Yes, you are going to stutter. You're going to do these things. They just, it's just not appealing to read ums all the time.
It's not. It's really not. The thing I like about Descript is that you can separate the audio from the video, and you can just upload. And that's what I would do for many times. I'd go through, and if I had a client that was a video client, I would edit the video, but I could edit it through the script. So all of the changes would be applied to the video and the audio. And then if they had two platforms, because they're going to put their video on YouTube for their podcast, and they're going to put their audio on another platform, whether that be Libsyn or Anchor.fm or StreamYard, we basically take that, separate that audio out, apply it here, and then apply the video.
For what I do for the podcast, yes, the video and the audio go to YouTube. The audio then goes on my website, and then I use an RSS feed to feed it out to 24 podcasts. The
Fantastic.
reason I did it that way is because I own the website. I didn't want to pay extra services to distribute it, and then if I forget a payment, my account goes away. That's why I own the website, and it does work sometimes. The problem is that when when countries who have never experienced my podcast want to hear it all at once, then it drives up the bandwidth and shuts my site down temporarily until they increase the bandwidth.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so it's that was for Libsyn and the other and what Anchor FM, you get an allocated amount of bandwidth, which is usually higher than what a website will give you. And but I'm and the thing is that I never dreamed that this podcast would go to as many episodes as it has. So when I started this podcast in 2018, I thought, the average 8 podcast episodes. If I get past that, I'm good. Then I got past 30. And at 34, I paused for about 6 months because I didn't think anybody was listening until everybody kept saying, Rob, when's your next episode coming out? So now we're at, today's episode's 287. So, people are enjoying it. So got to keep doing it.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, Rob, congratulations on that too. I heard that earlier before we got, started, but 287 is really huge. Most people don't even make it to episode 100. Most
Well,
people that start.
I'm stubborn. Yeah, I didn't want to quit. I'm not a quitter.
Well, that's the thing. And I worked on the most prolific podcast I ever worked on, ended up doubling in downloads in the last 2 years, 3 years of me working on it. I was there with the company for about 5 years. At the time, it was creeping up to that 2 million mark. And something happened to the podcast editor. He fell out. So I jumped in and said, hey, you know what? I'll take care over that because I've got the skills, right? At that point, I was already producing podcasts on the side for other people. I was like, why don't you let me take care of that for you? And I'll just make that part of my duties. And he goes, okay, cool. I saw exponential growth, and it wasn't because of my awesome editing capabilities or my fantastic show note writing. Nothing like that. You know what it was?
Yeah.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't even the hair. Nobody could see the producer. Like, do you produce that? That's amazing. It's funny, people's perceptions, right? It's like I was wondering who produced that. I went in there and cleaned up a lot of things that needed to be cleaned up, improved the quality of audio. That was the thing. Nobody was listening to the audio. The people that were quote unquote producing, what they were called producing was taking the intro, slapping in the episode, taking the outro, putting it in there, mixing it down. They weren't listening for the pops, the clicks, the stutters, the overmodulation. They weren't going in there and fine tuning, getting out the noise in the background. It's a wild, wild west when it comes to podcast and podcast editing. You can make anything sound like perfection. You can make it sound smooth and silky. And after I went in there and started modifying that, I noticed that the downloads increased. People were listening longer. People were starting to really dial in. And there were some people that came back and said, hey, listen, we heard the podcast is sounding really good now. It was okay before, but it's easier to listen to now. I was like, okay. So I had done that as an experiment and said, oh, this is working great, because I was on the right track and knew, because if I got rid of those little idiosyncrasies, right? It's no different than somebody sitting at dinner and smacking their food. that's a trigger for a lot of people psychologically. You know, nothing makes you want to throw a bowl of rice like somebody, chewing like a cow. Like we just don't like those noises. I don't know what it is, but we're just not fans of it. So, but by doing that, because he was so consistent, just like you're being consistent, I think that actually helped double it, and it ended up hitting 4 million in downloads by the time I left last year. So it's very key. I think it's great that you're moving forward with producing the podcast, and even as an author too, and somebody who works with authors. I
Mhm.
think it's wonderful. You're working with entrepreneurs that, you know, staying consistent is probably one of the most difficult things we can do as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and for me, it's always been about, not only hyper focusing on the hours that I'm actually working, because I've reduced my hours to about 4 to 5 hours a day, but staying consistent in the amount of content that I put out every day. And everybody's like, Rob, you're a monster. You're putting out all this stuff. They think that I'm putting out all this stuff. It looks like I'm putting out, but really I have a system in place where it's just, you know, and when I do have the content, then I put it in my auto scheduler. So that then it's recycling and spitting out more stuff. So people see the old and the new, and they're just thinking, wow, you must spend 20 hours a day in front of a computer. Okay, that's what you think.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the magic too. I've been I've been getting into batch creation of content,
Mhm.
and one of my favorite tools right now is Canva.
Hmm.
Canva has really stepped up their game. And I love it because you can use it for audio, you can use it for video, you can use it for pretty much every format you can imagine. I want to give your audience too a couple of other nuggets. As far as whipping out content really quickly, you can sit down and you can do let's say you take a 50-minute segment on video. There's a platform called vidyo.ai, vidyo.ai, and they'll give you 75 minutes a month free. They do have membership plans that are tiered, but basically it will go in and it will cut up content for you. It'll make reels with the captions already made into them. There are different templates on the back end. If you don't like the layout or the format, you can go and pick the templates in there. You can even upload your own branding, like overlays for your videos, and the captions are all in there. And it's very accurate too. I haven't had to go in and correct too many things. You can do it for TikTok, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. So if you're creating a lot of video content, vidyo.ai, I would definitely use that.
And how do people find you? Where do they go?
Yeah, you can find me on at mediasprinkles.com. My contact information's in there. So it's mediasprinkles.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Danny Galvez, the number 2. So those are probably the best places. And then you can find me on
And how
Facebook.
did you come up with media sprinkles?
You know, I was looking for, there's a lot of I think about it like this. As an entrepreneur, we have to be everywhere. And you said it perfectly. I mean, like if you weren't listening to what Rob just said, he just gave you a game plan and a roadmap. And you should probably talk to Rob more about this too, on how he sets up looking like he's everywhere for 20 hours a day, right? On social media. We have to sprinkle a little bit here and a little bit there, right? We have to let's look at our content. We can take one piece of content and make it into 50 pieces of content, right? So let's say you write an ebook. You take that ebook and you make it into an audiobook. You take that audiobook and you can basically make it into a video, right? Okay. You can take that and repurpose it as a blog. So you have all of this content to sprinkle in. You might have clips and
Right.
excerpts that you
This
put.
book is a prime example of recycling because the podcast became a transcript. The transcripts became a book. The book is now getting us speaking gigs and coaching and whatnot. So yes, you can go back and listen to all the audios for free. You buy the book, and you can have it with you and take it with you and go anywhere with you. And and like people say, it's like a master class in business.
Yeah.
You know,
I love it.
it's just another way to get your content out there into into the hands of people that could be your future clients.
Yeah, really can. And that's the thing. Media sprinkles. You
Mhm.
got to sprinkle a little bit of everything you have, your experiences, and you can't keep it separate. Talk about your family. Talk about being a grandfather. Talk about being a mother. Talk about, you know, the things you like. It could be something as simple as I like cake or I like pasta, right?
Mhm.
Um, Take pictures of where you go. Take videos and say nothing. I'll take a nature trail video and I'll just film it and just post it in my reels. You need to be populating your stories. And here's another hack for you too. It's not really a hack, but right now, if you're not getting a lot of traction, you want eyeballs on your stuff, whether you have a business page or your personal page on Facebook and Instagram, reels, reels, reels. Learn how to create a reel. It doesn't have to be that long. It can be a few minutes. I took a 40-second reel the other day, not even, of something I saw in Houston on the freeway. I was taking my brother to a doctor's appointment and there's this charger, black charger that speeds up next to me, and out of the sunroof is a Chucky doll and hair's blowing. That thing is still getting views on it on both Instagram and on Facebook. And I posted it as a reel. It went to my post and then I shared it into my stories, but it's getting a lot of eyeballs. Something very simplistic,
Mhm.
something very, I was humorous to
And
me.
I want people to understand that creating content, create it because you want to educate or entertain or engage someone. Don't create it because you want that thing to go viral.
That's
Because
right.
a forced video to go viral never makes you any money. It doesn't give you credibility, and it's only there for the purpose of hiking up hiking up the algorithm or your numbers or whatever. But you're not going to get the right type of eyeballs seeing who you really are. So create content that's you, that's your personality, that's your brand, that's that conduit that allows people to see you for who you are, and then you're going to get better types of clients.
Well, every single time. That's great advice, Rob.
So that's it. And I want to thank Danny for being here. Everybody go to Danny's site, mediasprinkles.com.
Yep. Yep.
And
Mediasprinkles.com. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
we'll see you guys on the next episode. Adios.